Let me say thank you to everybody that came to speak on this item, and certainly for your patience, not only today, but for the many years in which you have been asking for this, what I would argue is a very basic protection. I do feel very strongly about this on a number of fronts. As many of you know, I proudly served. When I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so I have firsthand knowledge of what it means to raise your right hand, say I'll support and defend the Constitution, do that faithfully, deploy, and yet not be able to be open about who I am. And my number one lesson from serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell is always to question, who am I not hearing from? And why am I not hearing from them? Often it's those exact individuals that are most in need of your leadership and of your compassion and of your advocacy. And today, we actually saw an example of who we are not hearing from. And I'm thankful to groups like American GI Forum. Thank you, Commander Pete Bernal, for actually giving voice to Ace, who, as you mentioned, because of his service, which left him with PTSD, he is not able to advocate for himself, has had to endure discrimination, housing discrimination in Military City, USA, simply for how he wants to pay for the housing that he has earned. I also feel quite strongly about this as somebody who benefited from a voucher as a young child, a voucher that allowed my mom to work several jobs so that she could take care of my younger sister and I. And as was just mentioned, the statistics about where vouchers are accepted, higher rates of poverty, more socially vulnerable, all of that lends itself to ensuring that we allow veterans the ability to take these vouchers and live in places that provide them with what they need. As mentioned, many have PTSD, many have disabilities. And so while they may be placed, I understand what the stats show. There's a lot of what the stats don't show. They don't show where veterans would prefer to live if given the option. They don't show that. They don't show the number of veterans that are many, many miles away from the VA clinic that they would prefer to live closer to if there was an opportunity to do so. Our veterans, my fellow brothers and sisters in arms, should not have to beg to not be discriminated against. They should not have to beg to not be discriminated against. I understand some folks see this issue differently. At the federal level, they are also grappling with this issue. Senator Kaine, in particular, is leading an effort to also address veteran source of income discrimination because it is, in fact, happening all throughout the country. At the state, they have afforded us the opportunity, while we cannot prohibit source of income discrimination for everybody, we can at least do it for veterans. The state has allowed that. And as was just pointed to by Molly, why would we not do that? Why would we not help the most vulnerable in our community, the most vulnerable veterans in our community? If this passes by 8 votes, tomorrow we can wake up in a city that says unequivocally, we do not discriminate against veterans based on how they pay for their housing. We can have that tomorrow morning. If it passes by 6, we wait 10 days. These are choices. These are choices that we can make to help ourselves and honor the commitment, honor the service, honor the sacrifice of veterans in this community. It's not clear to me why we would be okay with a little bit of discrimination, and then we'll see how it works out. Why would we be not okay with no discrimination, and we'll see how that works in 6 months? I appreciate the effort of my colleague, Councilwoman Castillo, and I support the CCR to incentivize folks to take these, to take vouchers. Because we have, if we have to, we have to, whatever we need to do to increase the supply. I understand that and I appreciate that. I think over the course of history, though, we have seen incentives hope that people do the right thing. We have seen throughout history how we have hoped that people would do the right thing, but oftentimes, what has been more effective is prohibiting people from doing the wrong thing. Prohibiting people from doing the wrong thing. And I would argue discriminating against a veteran simply for how they pay for their housing is the wrong thing. And as mentioned, with 8 votes, we can change this tomorrow. And those veterans can start looking online for where they'd like to live versus where they have to live based on the current restraints. I'm also surprised by the pushback of some. I don't think, if this wasn't an issue at the scale it is being discussed, I don't think folks would be fighting for this as hard as they have been for as long as they have been. I think folks have better things to do with their time and their energies than to talk about a problem that doesn't exist, which then lends itself to the conclusion that this is in fact a problem. It might only affect a handful, well, in part because less than 1% of our population will wear the nation's cloth. And yes, a small percentage will come back from their service different, and more in need of our help. And I would argue that we owe it to them to provide that. 2 years is a long time. 2 years is a long time to wait for this and to be arguably having the exact same discussion. I wish we were talking about additional protections for other vulnerable groups. And we will add that to our legislative agenda. I know Councilman McKee Rodriguez will prioritize that based on some of the feedback I heard from my colleagues on this issue. Those with disabilities, absolutely, are folks that we need to take into account. But we here in Military City, USA, have the opportunity to lead by example. Tomorrow, folks can wake up in a city that does not discriminate against veterans based on how they pay, and we should take advantage of that opportunity.